Tavis, Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. I see what you did there, Miles Lowe. I see what you did there. Send me forget-me-nots. I'll tell you why that's so cute in just a second. In this hour, a conversation about taking the proper steps right now to boost your short and long-term brain health. You get it? I know you get it. What are the things that set super agers apart from people with weak memory skills? Send me forget-me-nots. How do you curate an age-proof brain? Joined in this hour by internationally renowned brain health expert, Dr. Mark Milstein, who will download us on new strategies to improve memory, protect immunity, and fight off dementia. We can all use this conversation, and I am delighted to have one of his international stature as a guest in this hour. Dr. Milstein, good to have you on. How are you, sir?
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm happy to be here.
No, I'm glad to have you. Thank you for the hour. A lot to unpack regarding this new book, The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. I often start conversations by asking questions like these because I'm fascinated by the study of the brain. What turned you on to this as your vocation, your calling all these years ago?
Well, I think it was, but one thing is that we were learning so much about how the brain worked and how to make it work better. Mm-hmm. Really, there was a revolution in our understanding of things that people could do. I like to say little things that make a big impact. So, for example, we're learning about how to optimize your sleep based upon or improve your memory. So I think this idea that the research is showing us actionable steps that we can take that are really science-based and that they work. That's what got me so excited about getting this information out to people.
Mm-hmm. How would you frame, how do you regard, speaking of science, the ways in which over the years of your doing this, we have learned so much more, it seems to me, about the way the brain works?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the key messages is that we have so much more hope now about things that we can do. You know, just a couple years ago, for example, when it comes to things like memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, we really have things that we could say, oh, if you do these things, you can lower your risk of developing dementia or Alzheimer's. But now we know that based upon some lifestyle factors, we can lower risk significantly, anywhere from 30 to 60%. So that has been a huge jump forward in our understanding and our hope about how we can really protect people's brains short-term and long-term.
Mm-hmm. So I used this phrase a moment ago, and I got this phrase, of course, from you. It's in your work, super agers, and we're going to make a distinction over this hour between super agers and people who age but also have weak memory skills. When you say super agers, when you use that term, unpack that for starters, and we'll jump from there.
Yeah, definitely. So super agers are this group of people who are anywhere from their 70s, 80s, 90s up to 100. And if you test their memory, they have the memory skills of somebody who's decades younger. And in some cases, there's people in this group that have the memory of somebody who's 25 years old. So it's pretty amazing. So we're trying to understand, and there's these really fascinating studies to determine, what are their secrets? And what we realize, it's not just genes. It's not just their genetics. It's not things that they've inherited. That plays a part. That's a piece of the puzzle, but there's much more control over this than we thought and things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Is there a particular profile of these super agers? I mean, give me some sense of, I've got the characteristics that you're talking about, but I'm just trying to get a better understanding if there's a profile of who we're talking about here.
Well, there's some characteristics that they have in common. And
right.
One is that they tend to be lifelong learners.
Okay.
They tend to be people who are really learning new things, challenging their brain. And that seems to be a common thread. And that gives us a lot of insight into things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. And by lifelong learners, you mean what? I mean, people who read all the time, do crossword puzzles. What do you mean by lifelong? They take classes, they audit classes. What do you mean by lifelong learners?
Yeah, definitely. So it doesn't have to be a crossword puzzle. What we always think, it's crossword puzzles or the Sudoku or the brain games, but really it's new information. So it could be a new class, it could be a book, a podcast. The key thing that we're seeing is that there's something really important about new information. the brain's new things. It makes new connections between our brain cells. And as we get older, we can lose those connections. So by learning new information, we put new connections back in. And so it's kind of like a bank account. You know, when there's withdrawals, you notice the withdrawals, but if you keep putting deposits in like new connections, you don't notice those withdrawals as much. And so that it really seems to be just pick something that you're interested in that's outside of your field of expertise. It could be a foreign language, a musical instrument, it could be a sport. But a part of this is that make it things that you enjoy and also have some variety. You know, we like to say cross-train your brain. You wouldn't go to the gym and just work out. Part of this is learn something mentally challenging, something physically challenging, like, you know, go dancing. Dancing is actually really good for the brain. It's mental, it's physical, and also be social. That's what we're learning, is that just meeting a friend for coffee, having a conversation, picking up the phone. If you're reading a new book, talk about it, engage with the book, a book club. This is what we're talking about. It doesn't have to be a fancy brain game. You don't have to download anything, you know, something on your phone. It's really just about new information, embracing it, and talking about it and being engaged. Just getting started in this hour in conversation with Dr. Mark Milstein, one of the world's foremost experts in brain health. His new book is called The Age-Proof Brain: New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. We're going to talk throughout this hour about how you can become a super ager if you start boosting your short and long-term brain health significantly and lower the risk of dementia right now. There are steps you can take right now to do that, and we'll talk a great deal more about that. Glad I've got him for the hour. You're listening to Dr. Mark Milstein on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Good thing we've got 3 hours.
More of Tavis, Smiley when we come forward. KBLA Talk 1580 wishes you a happy holiday and wants to bless you with one night only. A Wonder Winter's Night presented by Stevie Wonder's House Full of Toys benefit concert. Saturday, December 17th at Microsoft Theater. Download the KBLA Talk 1580.com mobile app to enter to win a pair of tickets. This has been a community call to action brought to you by KBLA Talk 1580.
California has millions of homes that could be damaged in a strong earthquake, and earthquakes are inevitable in the Golden State. An older home is especially vulnerable to earthquake damage, so you may need to take steps to strengthen it and help reduce the chance of damage. Visit strengthenmyhouse.com to learn about better protecting your home from earthquake damage. The work may cost less than you think and can often be completed in a few days. You've worked hard to get a home. Now's the time to protect it. Get prepared today so you can worry less tomorrow. Visit strengthenmyhouse.com.
Will they find a home? Sponsored by Geico. Steve is intrigued by the paranormal.
Otherworldly spirits really make a house a home, you know?
Janice has different taste.
I'd like my house to not be haunted.
Compromise is tough, but these two won't have to compromise when they bundle home and car insurance with Geico. It's easy, and they could save even more. In the end, Steve and Janice found a renovated Victorian that's only haunted from 9 to 5.
Okay, wife's home. I gotta bounce.
Bye, Steve.
Bundling without compromise at geico.com.
It's pro time, because at Lowe's, it's Provember. Save big with inventory you can count on, like Flex products or DeWalt power tools starting at just $99. Plus, Lowe's MVPs members earn up to 3 times bonus points per dollar on select items. Save all Provember long. Bonus points calculated before taxes and fees after applicable discounts, if any. MVP's Pro Rewards Program. Terms and restrictions apply. See Lowe's.com/L/Pro Loyalty Terms. Subject to change. Prices valid from 10/17/22 to 2/3/23 or until supplies last.
The Institute for Diversity Certification is all about the 3 Ds: dedication, determination, and discipline. Learn more about our globally recognized diversity certification program today by calling 1-800-983-6192. Again, 1-800-983-6192, or visit diversitycertification.org. As the #1 organization for certified diversity professionals and also certified diversity executive credentials, diversitycertification.org will provide an opportunity for you to demonstrate dedication to the field, determination to make progress, and more discipline to your process. Go today and learn more about the diversity certification system. Call 1-800-983-6192. Again, 1-800-983-6192. Or go to diversitycertification.org. That's diversitycertification.org. The standard of excellence, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
I know you want to leave me, but I refuse to let you go.
Ain't
Too Proud is a celebration that brings the audience to its feet. Ain't too proud to play, as you know it. The Grammy-winning songs, the Tony-winning movies. Ain't Too Proud, the life and times of the Temptations. Returning to the Amundsen December 13th. Tickets at AmundsenTheater.org.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
Our guest in this hour is Dr. Mark Milstein. His new book is called The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. You were saying before that break, Dr. Milstein, that one of the ways that we can start to boost our short and long-term brain health is to become lifelong learners. We were talking about that a moment ago. And one of the things you said was that we should try to make ourselves an expert in something beyond what we already know. And that took me back to, when I was 21 or 22, I was at a conference, and a conference with, in fact, Coretta Scott King, who I remember fondly. And one of the leaders in the movement, along with Dr. King, was a man named Bernard Lafayette, who's still living. And Bernard Lafayette was saying to a group of us young student leaders from across the country then, in my early 20s, that was 30 years ago, was saying to me then, those of us in this room, that we should start the process right now. He was saying to us, to become an expert in something outside of our field of interest. He said, you will not ever come to really appreciate how much better off you're going to be as your career unfolds by making yourself an expert in a field outside of that which you are already studying. I never forgot that advice. Started working on that myself in my early 20s, and I can say now there are a few areas outside of broadcast that I'm fairly well versed in. But tell me why that is so important as one of the ways to boost our short and long-term brain health.
Yeah, that's great. And so what we're seeing is that it's not just one thing, but this learning new information is important. And as we get older, part of what we're seeing is that our brain makes waste and byproducts, and basically we're calling this brain trash. And as it fills up in our brain, we have to get rid of it. And as we get older, that process can be less efficient. And so getting a good night's sleep helps you get rid of this waste. We can talk about that. But just actually learning something new actually helps a chemical in the brain called norepinephrine be released. And it's almost like, you power wash your garage, your backyard. Imagine spraying your brain with this chemical. You're actually washing and keeping your brain clean by learning new information. And the key is newness, new information. There's nothing wrong with practicing information we already know or getting better at a song on the piano that we've learned, but a new song or new information or a new language, that newness releases that chemical that we believe it washes it. And I know it's an interesting way to think about it, but we want to keep our brain youthful, and one of the ways that we do that is by keeping it clean and removing this byproducts of this waste and this garbage that builds up.
Yep. When you say brain trash, I hear you, but unpack for me in the audience what is. What is this brain trash that our brain creates?
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is that the brain's about 3 pounds, and every year it makes 5 pounds of waste and garbage and trash, and it's a byproduct of, think of your brain cells like little factories. You've got 80 billion brain cells, so 80 billion little factories. They make products, which is like a connection every time you learn something new. That's what we want. Like if they make byproducts, so chemical reactions in the brain have these byproducts, and it's just waste, leftover parts of these reactions that build up, and that build up, we need to remove it. And as we get older, it's harder or it's less efficient to remove it. And just like a house or an apartment could be filled up with trash or waste, and it's harder to get things done or focus, same thing in our brain. So we want to be doing things to keep our brain clean. And also the other thing that we realize is that our own immune system can incorrectly attack our brain cells and actually turn them from functioning brain cells into basically useless trash. I know that it's hard to, it's a bit shocking to hear that, but that's also why the book is about keeping your immune system in check, inflammation low, keeping all these things balanced. And we realize it's these multiple factors that we want to be aware of to keep the brain clean, to keep it, slow down the aging process, and really keep it functioning for as long as possible.
Yep. The one thing I was saying to somebody yesterday, in fact, the older I get and the more I do this and I've been at this for a few decades now, being a broadcast personality, as you may know, on television and radio. But as long as I've been in this game, I've heard this, and I keep hearing it more and more with the people that I interview and have the honor to be in conversation with, and that is this notion of the value of sleep. It just seems to me that we've learned a great deal more in the 30 years that I've been doing this about the importance of getting sleep. And here you come telling me now that one of the ways we wash that brain trash out is to get more sleep. So I'm not surprised by that, but I'm wondering if you'll take some time to just unpack for me and the audience the value of sleep vis-a-vis short and long-term brain health.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right. It's sleep is basically like our superpower.
Yeah.
It's something we can take control of to really help our brain health. And we now know we have this breakthrough that when you go to sleep tonight, your brain inside your skull is essentially going to shrink down to about 65% of its current size. I know that sounds like a horror movie, but your brain is shrinking. It's like squeezing out like a sponge all this trash, waste, and garbage. And then fluid comes up from your spinal cord and you wash this trash away. So every night you give yourself a squeeze to squeeze out the waste that just builds up as part of being alive, and then you wash it away. And, if we don't get a good night's sleep and you wake up and you have that kind of foggy feeling, part of what that is this buildup of this waste in the brain. So we want ourselves every opportunity to get the best night's sleep so that we can keep our brain clean and protect it short-term and long-term. We can absolutely talk about some tips there because we've learned based upon how our brain works how to make that process as effective as possible because we really want to be getting that good brainwash every night.
Yep, let's do those tips now. I don't want to get too far away from it while we're talking about it. So give me the tips for how to help wash that brain trash away.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a whole chapter in the book dedicated to it because it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
But two things that are really important, and it's a bit surprising, is in the morning, if you can get outside for a few minutes into natural sunlight, you actually help your brain fall asleep at night. And it sounds so simple, but in the last couple of years, we've either been spending more time at home, or we jump in a car, or we commute, we get on the bus, subways. We're missing out on some outside time in the morning. The study suggests it's about 10 minutes, and there's this clock in the brain that actually sets almost like a countdown.
Mm-hmm.
Time we get outside in the morning, give ourselves that little bit of natural light, it actually helps us fall asleep that night. So it's interesting that there's something we do in the morning that helps us sleep that night. It's not all about just 5 minutes before bed. So something really simple is just giving yourself a little bit more natural light. And the second thing is that
hold on. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off.
Of course.
That is so important to me, and I apologize for the interruption here. As they say,
of course.
Pardon the interruption. Yeah.
Happy to discuss.
Yeah. But I'm fascinated. So I hear you telling us to go outside for 10 minutes in the morning, and that the brain sort of sets a clock, and it knows to wind down later that night. But what is it about the sunlight? What is it about being outside? What is it about that 10 minutes outside that makes the difference?
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is that there's this discovery actually in part of this won the Nobel Prize. So
Mm-hmm.
You basically have this little bit of this clump of brain cells, the size of a head of a pin. It's called your brain clock or supracrus. When it's in the presence of light, it starts basically a countdown process, mm-hmm. and it releases all the chemicals and hormones that help you with your metabolism. It helps your mood. It also helps this countdown for sleep. So our brain, it's part of the circadian rhythm that we hear about, mm-hmm. but our brain is really tied to light and dark. Our brain evolved over, thousands and thousands and thousands of years with light and dark. And now in our modern world, we might not be getting out as much in the morning. And then that other part is what's happening in our bedrooms at night, especially in the hour before bed with all these devices mm-hmm. that actually mimic sunlight. They look a lot like sunlight to our brain, the screens. And it can confuse our brain into thinking that it's daytime, and then our brain has a harder time falling asleep or staying asleep. So our brain is really tuned to light and dark. And although it sounds so simple, if we take a step back and think about our modern world, it can be really easy to be spending less time outside, or especially in the morning, and less in darkness at night or the hour before bed, because the use of all these devices that are they're fun and they're useful, yeah. and they have their good qualities, but they also can they can play a role in having a negative impact on sleep.
Yep. Now, forgive me, it's the talk show host to me that loves to know the why. I heard the advice, but I'm always fascinated by the why, and so I wanted to know why.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, why that 10 minutes makes a difference. Okay, I'm sorry, I cut you off. The second point you were about to make. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's good, because the why is so important, and because otherwise the tip sounds like, morning light, big deal. But when we see the science behind it, that's when it really becomes much more powerful. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yep. So
is at nighttime. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to forget that second tip you were about to give me, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The second tip is that same brain clock. What it's releasing at night to help you fall asleep is melatonin. And the way that your brain releases melatonin is by being in the dark. And those devices, phones, the tablets, the light they emit looks just like the sun. It's something called blue light. And the brain says, it's daytime, and it doesn't let your brain release melatonin. And so that can keep you from falling asleep. That's the science behind it. And if we go back to the morning, then morning light in the morning actually helps shut off the melatonin, helping your brain start countdown. So we're on this cycle. And so that's why we would just want to try our best to stay on it with these little tips.
Mm-hmm. Earlier in our conversation, Dr. Milstein used this phrase, which jumped out at me, and I love it. And again, it's in your, you talk about this in your book as well. You discuss all this stuff in your book, which is why I have you on. That goes without saying. But this notion of cross-training our brain, unpack that for me.
Yeah, so the idea behind cross-training your brain is that you want to think about different varieties of activities for your brain. Mm-hmm. And so, a common question I always get asked is, I do crossword puzzles. Like crossword puzzles, keep doing them. It can have some benefit. You don't have to do a crossword puzzle if that's not the thing for you. But think about your brain is like your body, and different parts of your brain become active when you use them, and the brain is actually use it or lose it. So if we don't keep parts of our brain engaged, they can atrophy or they can get weaker. So for example, that's why we want to do things like play sports or dance or yoga or ballet or Pilates, because, for example, balance. Balance is something that we see that as we get older, if our balance gets weaker or not as strong, the brain ages. And as kids, we tend to do things that are much more engaged with our balance. We run around, we jump around, we stand on one leg. As we get older, we don't do those things as much. So we just want to take time during the week and think of that. That's one way to cross-train your brain. Mm-hmm. Do something physical. Do something that trains your brain physically. Something that's a little bit, it's fun, but make it a little bit challenging. Yeah. Then also, as we talked about before, learn something new, foreign language, musical instrument. And then the last thing is that we see that people who attend dinner parties, for example, they have a lower risk of memory loss. And it's not really just about the dinner party. It's about learning, listening, being engaged. And then also one last piece here, we're learning there's underlying factors. For example, hearing loss. If someone has hearing loss, they have an increased risk of memory loss. But if you just treat the hearing loss with something like a hearing aid, all that risk, and that's really what we're talking about, is how do we lower risk for memory loss. Mm-hmm. If we can treat the hearing loss with something like a hearing aid, all ends to way. And if we're listening, if we're hearing, we're learning new things, we're engaged. So it's this cross-training of just having this engagement throughout the week and saying, one day of the week I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to take a new class. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to do a book of the month. I'm going to attend a talk, anything like that. Second day of the week, I'm going to do something physical, aerobics, dance, ballet, Pilates, yoga, anything, sports. Pickleball is taking over the country. That's anything like that is great. And then the third thing is make sure you take time to reach out and feel connected or engaged. We're seeing that feeling lonely or isolated actually increases the risk of dementia, and it's understanding the last couple of years, our mental health is part of our brain health. Yeah. We want to be on top of these things and being engaged, and you don't have to be surrounded by people, but we want to feel connected in some way.
That answer you just gave to how to cross-train our brain has raised more questions for me, which I'll ask when we come forward after news, traffic, and sports. But in 45 seconds prior to that, let me ask you right quick. I think I get it. You mentioned dancing a couple of times. If the balance part of dancing is how dancing helps our brain, then I get it. Am I missing something about that, though, about why dancing is so good for brain health?
Yeah. So we have these lists of things that we know are good for brain health. They are learning new things. Dancing involves learning new steps.
Right, okay.
Physical, stress relief, social. It involves hearing, So it's a big bang for your buck activity.
Got
it hits a lot of things on that list. So if you like to dance, embrace it. If you don't want to dance, think about playing a sport or something like that.
All right. I'm going dancing tonight. Meet me at, I'm just teasing. Maybe I will. Maybe I should. I didn't know. Who knew that dancing could do all that for your brain? See, this is why you listen to KBLA Talk 1580. You learn things that you otherwise wouldn't know. Our guest in this hour is Dr. Mark Milstein. His book is called The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. More with him after news, traffic, and sports. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where truth prevails. The tricky station is down the dial.
I'm Mike Moore, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Texas, the man suspected of murdering African-American rapper Takeoff in Houston is making another court appearance today. Court records say surveillance video caught Patrick Xavier Clark firing a gun outside of the 810 Billiards and Bowling Alley on the night Takeoff was shot and killed. In an earlier court hearing, Clark's bond was set at $2 million after prosecutors described him as a flight risk. A South Mississippi man is facing up to 10 years in prison after pleading guilty to federal hate crime charges involving the burning of a cross in his own front yard. Prosecutors say 24-year-old Axel Cox did it in order to intimidate his black neighbors. Investigators also reported Cox used threatening and racially derogatory remarks towards his black neighbors. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Good news for folks in Costa Mesa. A 5-car pileup has been cleared out of your way on the 55 southbound just before Dyer Road. Traffic is recovering from 4th Street in Santa Ana. To downtown L.A. and the 101 freeway, 3 cars have slammed together against the center divider. This is on the southbound 101 at Broadway. And in the East L.A. interchange, 5 southbound before Cesar Chavez, 2 cars have banged together. That accident is up against the center divider.
Dell's Days of Deals start now with savings on select XPS laptops and Alienware PCs powered by 12th Gen Intel Core processors, plus savings on accessories and free shipping. Call 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The following is a public service announcement for USC football coach Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly at UCLA. Deion Sanders is in your neighborhood, and there's a good chance he'll be knocking on the front door of the top high school players in California. Deion is the new coach at Colorado after a fabulous run at Jackson State. Previous coaches at Colorado tried to recruit California talent. The difference is that the fathers and the uncles of today's top high school players saw Deion light up the NFL. Deion already has a commitment from Winston Watkins, a 4-star wide receiver from Fort Myers, Florida. Watkins was considering Texas A&M, but changed his mind when Deion was confirmed at Colorado. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by MVP Accident Attorneys. When it comes to your settlement, we're a slam dunk. Call 833-MVP-WINS or check their website at themvp.com for a free case review.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call on me, your MVP.
Congratulations to Trinity Unlimited Childcare for being KBLA Talk 1580's Office of the Week. Enter your business today in the KBLA app or KBLA1580.com for the Office of the Week. Congratulations to Trinity Unlimited Childcare.
Did you know it pays to drive electric? With government rebates, you'll save thousands on the purchase of a new or used EV. And the more you drive, the more you'll save, both on fuel and maintenance far into the future. Start seeing savings today. Learn more at ladwp.com/EV. That's ladwp.com/EV.
When you're young, life is full of choices. Don't let opioids like highly addictive and deadly fentanyl take away your life with just one wrong pill. Addiction is a disease that can affect anyone at any age. But there is a choice to get help for this disease. Find medically proven treatment options, including virtual, at choosemat.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a whole lot to talk about.
Hi, Maisha Cairo here, KBLA, live at Chase Bank on Crenshaw and Vernon for the In This Together tour with female business owners, a day of empowerment, community panels, and best of all, tips on building business from marketing to capital. Today I spoke with Tatiana, a community manager for JP Morgan Chase.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Tatiana Roberts. I am a community manager for JP Morgan Chase. I have to honestly say that this has been the most fulfilling position that I've ever had, where I get to give back to the community because I saw my mom's struggles. That's really what fuels what I do to make sure that the community has all the access to the resources that my mother didn't have.
So for the mother who's in business, what are 3 quick tips you can give to ensure that they're on the right path to accessing financial support from a bank like Chase?
Say number 1, just make sure that you're checking your credit on a consistent basis and taking action to either fix your credit, maintain your credit, or rebuild your credit. The second thing would be budget. I know that B word is kind of like ugly for, right? A lot of people don't like that B word, but it has to be done. We need to tell our money where to go. The last thing is to build a network of supporters that are going to lift you up.
The community building here in Crenshaw is that network. So visit the Chase Community Center on Crenshaw and Vernon. Meet a banker today. Tell them about your business. I'm Maisha Cairo in the community for KBLA with JP Morgan Chase.
Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Dr. Mark Milstein, I knew this conversation would hit a nerve, and I'm just tickling because I'm laughing because I was tickled, and I'll share some with you in just a second here. I'm just checking out all the posts on our socials and even personal messages that I'm receiving. Dr. Milstein is the author of the new book, The Age-Proof Brain. The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. Before I share some of these messages I've been getting here, I get a chance at the bottom of the hour. I have about a 6-minute break at the bottom of the hour, as you know, because you just sat through it. So with sports and news and traffic, I've got about 6 minutes, which is the longest break I have in any hour of this program. And that's when I get a chance oftentimes to just check what people are saying about the show, about the conversation on our various social platforms, social media platforms. So before I share with you, I suspect you're so used to this now, you don't get surprised anymore, but it must be awfully fun for you to present on this subject around the world all the time, because clearly this conversation about improving brain health, nobody wants to get Alzheimer's, nobody wants dementia, nobody wants to take care of somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. We all want to live as long as we can live and have our brains function in prime form for as long as we can. So I guess you're not surprised that when you have these conversations that people really, really get into these things.
Well, I think that we all, exactly what you said, we all want to do the things that can protect our brain, protect our loved ones' brains. And so the conversation now has become so much more hopeful because we have things that we can do to lower risk. And that's really what it's all about, is how do we try to push the odds in our favor? And it's by putting together these little lifestyle tips, these little things that can have a big impact.
Yeah, you'll be tickled by some of this stuff, so I'm just going to share this because it's kind of funny to me. So first of all, my brother, I have 9 brothers and sisters, and I love them all. They listen to this program, most of them back in Indiana. They listen on the app, KBLA 1580. So download the app. As I say every day, you can hear us anywhere in the world in real time. My brother Derwin and my sister-in-law Leah run a business together called the Society for Diversity, the foremost diversity organization in the country at training companies and individuals on the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he was just texting me saying, I've been telling Leah, Tavis, I need more sleep. I need to work less. Now I have scientific proof to back me up. Please thank Dr. Milstein. That's from my brother Derwin. So a personal thank you from him, Doobie, as we call him. I have a friend of mine named Tyra, who's a major producer of the number one morning show in Chicago. And she says, I love this advice, going outside for 10 minutes, but that doesn't work for folk who get up in the dark to go to work. So any advice for Tyra, Dr. Milstein?
Yes. So it's okay if you wake up before the sun comes up, but when the sun does come up, think about getting outside for a few minutes, taking that quick break, which is really good for your brain. If you remember, at certain times of the year, understandably, it's too cold. Getting by a window can be good. There's also these things called light boxes, which can mimic the sunlight in the morning for people as well. That's become mainstream medicine to help people sleep. But it's okay to wake up before the sun comes up, but when the sun does come up, think about giving yourself that little dose of light.
There you go, Tyra. One of my colleagues here, talk show host on the weekends, she hosts a show called The Backstory, Michelle Duffy. So she's trying to get me right now, Dr. Milstein, to organize an outing for all of our colleagues here to go dancing one night at the station.
That sounds good.
Her argument is that if anybody needs brain health, it's talk show host. So we should all go dancing one night. So now I'm getting pressure to organize an outing for all of my team here to go dancing one night. And this is a question from one of our listeners who says, please ask Dr. Milstein if there's any evidence that the replacement of social interaction with texting is adversely impacting brain health. So there you go, Doc.
Oh, that's a really good question. So, these devices, the texting, they can be good. So if it's a way to reach out and it's a way to connect, we want to do it. But there actually was a study a few months ago that found that people felt better, less stressed when they actually picked up the phone and they made a phone call and they heard the person's voice. As human beings, there's something about the sound of someone's voice. So really the take home is that a text can be a great way to reach out and connect, but if you want to go one step further, there is some evidence that, making that quick phone call, having that connection, and, when we can and it's safe to do, we want to also have some in-person interaction too. So it's thinking about having a variety of these interactions with people and they all can be good, but thinking about mixing them up as well.
Yep. As I have listened to you over the course of this hour, which I'm just delighted to have you on this program, so thank you for accepting our invitation. As I've listened to what you said so far, Dr. Milstein, it seems to me that whether or not there's evidence to prove this or not, just based on your research, the pandemic had to do a great deal of harm to our short and long-term brain health, just given all the things you said about getting outside, about being social, about listening and learning and being engaged with other people, about not being isolated, about not being lonely, all the things you've already laid out. The pandemic is the perfect storm for all those things.
That's what we're concerned about. So we want to take these actions now. We do know that over the last 2.5 years, the rates of depression, anxiety have gone up significantly. And we now know that if those conditions aren't treated or managed, they can actually increase the risk of memory loss down the road. So what we want to do is we want to get the message out and the word out that we want to treat not only mental health today and prioritize it and do all the things that we're talking about, because it does impact our long-term brain health. So that's exactly what you said is correct. We want to get this. We want to have this conversation. We want to talk about blacks.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to this notion of being lonely and being isolated and how that diminishes our good brain health, short-term and long-term. And I don't mean to equate these two, but I live alone. And so I am oftentimes by myself, oftentimes isolated, to use the word that you use. I'm wondering whether or not there's any evidence that suggests that those of us who live alone, those of us who tend to be more isolated, we're not. I mean, here's the irony for me. I grew up, as I said a moment ago, I grew up with 9 brothers and sisters, my mother, my father, and my grandmother, Big Mama. So I grew up in a house with 13 people. So I grew up having no privacy. I was never alone. There was no isolation. There was no time to be lonely. There was no space to be lonely. Fast forward, now I live alone, and I'm wondering whether or not there's any evidence that suggests that, to your point, being alone, being isolated, if that does impact our short and long-term brain health, is there evidence that suggests that living with a family, living with others, is better for brain health than being alone, being single?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. What we do see is that where is your comfort level? So somebody could be surrounded by people and still feel lonely, and people can be alone and not feel lonely at all.
Sure.
And so what we really want people to be aware of is just take that time and think about, how am I feeling? If I'm feeling like I'm not with people and I'm isolated, then we want to think of that almost like if you had physical pain and you would say, I need to go do something about this physical pain. Loneliness is a feeling that we want to listen to, and we want to say, we want to connect with people. If it's a text, if it's a phone call, if it's a Zoom meeting or not a Zoom meeting, but a Zoom call, or it's going out and meeting up and having, just watching a game together or whatever it is, we want to listen to those signals and not ignore them and say, wait a second, I'm feeling a bit lonely. I need to go take some action and do these things. On the other hand, people can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. And then we want to think about, okay, which are the ways that we can address that? Maybe sometimes it's being around different people or finding the right meaningful interactions. Maybe it's a sense of purpose, mentoring. Those interactions tend to make people feel so that just taking those assessments and saying, what are the actions I can take to address these feelings I'm having if someone is having them.
Yep. This is the perfect place, I think, to pivot to a couple of other things that you write about in your book, The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. One of those things, I think, again, perfect time to pivot to it right now, this notion of increasing energy and boosting our moods. Can you say a word about that?
Yeah. So what we realize is that our day-to-day mood, our energy, how we're feeling is related to our short-term and long-term brain health. And part of that, I don't want to leave this conversation without mentioning this, is that part of that is conditions. So diabetes, heart disease, those conditions, along with what's happening in our gut, they impact how we feel each day. But they also, if they're not treated, they increase the risk of memory loss down the road. Now, the really good news is we have really good treatments for these conditions. And so we want to think the part of protecting our brain is what's happening from the neck down. And we want to treat those conditions because we clearly see that if we can be on top of those conditions, we increase our mood, our energy. With every beat of your heart, you're sending oxygen to your brain. Even little dips in oxygen, if our heart's not functioning properly, we don't feel as good. That is off focus, our productivity, but it's also damaging those brain cells long term. And again, we just keep coming back to the theme, which is we want to address the things that we can treat really, really well and in most cases quite easily. So we want to be on top of blood pressure, heart health, diabetes, and gut health, and what's happening in those areas, because again, those are the roads to protect the brain.
Since he teed it up, when we come forward, I'll come right back to this next issue of how we go about reducing the risk of anxiety and depression, which would help boost our short and long-term brain health. How do we reduce the risk of anxiety and depression? More with our guest in this hour. So pleased to have him, Dr. Mark Milstein. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Huffington Post reports a mental health crisis among Black students. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News. Rates of depression and anxiety among Black students have been increasing at a staggering rate. A study from the National Institute of Health found that approximately 34% of Black students reported feeling so depressed in the last year that it was difficult to function. Black students attending HBCUs have also been dealing with additional stress of bomb threats at their universities and suddenly not having access to abortion services in the wake of Roe versus Wade. According to the CDC, Black women in the U.S. are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications, and abortion restrictions could increase the maternal mortality rate for Black women. Huffington Post also reports that the quest to raising awareness for mental illness among Black Americans is a priority. Tell us what you think about this story and more on all socials at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Health is Wealth and Medicare and Covered California's open enrollment for medical insurance is here. RHJ Insurance Agency can help you find affordable rates and the plan that's just right for you and your family. Call 562-204-6120 for your free quote. Don't leave your health to chance. Open enrollment is here and affordable coverage is just a phone call away. Call 562-204-6120 for your free quote and get the coverage you need. Go to www.rhjins.com.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call me your MVP.
The Institute for Diversity Certification is all about the 3 Ds: dedication, determination, and discipline. Learn more about our globally recognized diversity certification program today by calling 1-800-983-6192. Again, 1-800-983-6192, or visit diversitycertification.org. As the #1 organization for certified diversity professionals and also certified diversity executive credentials, diversitycertification.org will provide an opportunity for you to demonstrate dedication to the field, determination to make progress, and more discipline to your process. Go today and learn more about the diversity certification system. Call 1-800-983-6192. Again, 1-800-983-6192. Or go to diversitycertification.org. That's diversitycertification.org. The standard of excellence, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Dr. Mark Milstein's new book is called The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. It is, trust me on this, it's science-driven, of course, but the book is written in a very entertaining, motivating, and easy-to-follow sort of guide. Great Christmas gift, holiday gifts. I highly recommend it. It's very easy to work your way through. Oftentimes we get intimidated by books about science and the like, but this one will not intimidate you or any person you give it to as a gift. It's a great read and a lot of good information in it. And obviously, we can all benefit from it. So I'm delighted to have him in conversation in this hour. You kind of mentioned this earlier, Dr. Milstein, but I'm wondering the ways in which we have been surprised in this hour about the brain's surprising connection to the rest of our body.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the key thing, is that we want to be aware that there are these powerful connections with our heart health, with our blood pressure. We see that individuals who have blood pressure that's in normal ranges, their brain looks more youthful, it's more protected even decades later. We're aware that if someone has diabetes, for example, and it's not treated effectively, it raises their risk of memory loss about 60%. But if we treat the diabetes effectively, that risk comes all the way back down. And so what we realize is that these underlying conditions are driving some of the memory loss that we're seeing. And so we want to have this conversation. We want to be aware of it. We want to be treating these things effectively because they are some of the most powerful things we can do to really protect our brain short-term and long-term.
We've been talking throughout this hour about, as you put it, little things that can make a big impact. How do we go about reducing the risk of anxiety and depression?
I think, that's such a good point. One thing is that I wanted to say before we're out of time is that you having these conversations is appreciated, because the first thing we have to do is lessen the stigma so that we can talk about mental health, anxiety, depression. We really don't want people suffering in silence. That's the first step. The second thing is to be aware that these feelings can be normal in these times, and there's things that we can do. It's not always just one thing. It's not one action that's the solution, but even the things that we've talked about, optimizing our sleep, getting some exercise, being more engaged socially, but then also having a conversation with a professional, a therapist, and getting to the root problem, and being understanding that in these times there are some things, transitioning from the pandemic to the states that we're in now, what's happening in our news cycle politically. All these things can be absolutely driving feelings of depression, anxiety, understandably. It doesn't mean it's the only thing, but really taking a step back for the individual and saying, talking about it. The first step is we need to talk. We need to have the conversation to be of getting to what are the root causes for that individual. Sometimes it's some physical things, sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's mental, sometimes it's a combination of all three. But again, we really want to get the word out that we have really good treatments for anxiety and depression, and it's important that we have those conversations so that people can get the help that they need, whether it be optimizing aspects. We're talking about having that connection or that help.
Yep. The book is called The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. We've been talking in this hour with the author of that text, internationally renowned brain health expert, Dr. Mark Milstein, about how we improve memory and productivity, how we form healthy habits to supercharge our brains. When we come forward in our remaining moments with him, two questions I want to ask before we let him get away from us. One, I started this conversation by saying that serious mental decline is not an inevitable part of aging. And yet I want to get Dr. Milstein to balance that statement with genetics and whether or not some of us are genetically predisposed to have our brains fail us as we get older. I want to see if there's a connection there. And secondly and finally, I want to ask him what stress does to our brain health, short and long term. Remaining moments with Dr. Mark Milstein when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to gear with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20.
So am I, because I'm at risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
I'm asking about Prevnar 20 because there's a chance pneumococcal pneumonia could put me in the hospital.
Age 65 or older, you may be at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine, a Pfizer vaccine that can help protect against pneumococcal pneumonia in just one dose. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infections from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia. Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you've had a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. The most commonly reported side effect was pain at the injection site. For additional common side effects and full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138 or visit Prevnar20.com.
I want to be able to keep my plans.
So I'm asking my doctor about getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 invites you to join us in celebrating the season of giving by being part of the solution. As we enjoy great food, family, warmth, and well wishes in whatever our festive tradition may be, we share the beauty of the season by reaching out to the less fortunate. Please help us to help others with the KBLA Cover the Houseless Cozy Community Coat and Blanket Drive. All you have to do is drop off new or clean, gently used winter coats and blankets in the KBLA lobby during business hours, now through December 20th. All of the coats and blankets will be donated to unsheltered individuals and families experiencing houselessness. Simply bring your donation to 4434 Crenshaw Boulevard in Los Angeles, near Vernon Avenue, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. That's 4434 Crenshaw in historic Leimert Park. During the holidays and every day, let's remember, we keep us safe. We keep us warm. We are the safety net, and together we can cover the unsheltered. Get caught up in the spirit of the season, the spirit of love. Make a difference with your friends at KBLA Talk 1580.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
I see a lot of your comments, which I had time to read them on the air. I do not, but thank you for listening, engaging in this conversation with Dr. Mark Milstein, and I'm always fascinated to see the comments made by our listeners about our guests, so thank you. Dr. Milstein, 3 minutes left in this conversation. 2 questions in that 3 minutes. One, as I said a moment ago, I started this conversation by suggesting, as you have in your text, that serious mental decline is not an inevitable part of aging, and yet can you balance that with me vis-a-vis the issue of genetics?
Yeah, definitely. So this is where we're seeing a lot of hope. Genes do play a role. They can raise or lower risk of things like Alzheimer's. But in 95 to 99% of all cases, it's not just genes. We're realizing it's our lifestyle. It's the things that we're doing, these little things they can really play a role in bringing that risk down. So for the vast majority of the population, what we're realizing is that genes aren't destiny. We're not doomed to lose our memory in almost all cases. And so that really gives us these insights that these lifestyle things, these little things have that powerful impact to bring risks back down.
So you have no problem condoning the following statement, that every one of us can, in fact, boost our short and long-term brain health.
I mean, there is that 1 to 5% where there's these tragic cases what we call early onset Alzheimer's, but and we need more research there, and we need more understanding and more treatments. But for the rest of the population, what we're seeing is this big step forward, that we're seeing that there's things that we can do to absolutely bring our risk down.
And finally, on the issue of stress, I'm asking this for personal reasons. What does stress do to our brains?
So here's a surprise. Stress in a moment, in a burst, is really good for your brain. You don't drive it and you leave it in the garage, it falls apart. And so stress is that cortisol, that stress hormone. A moment of stress, a burst of stress, something you want to get done, a challenge you want to tackle. It's really good for your brain. We want to be engaged. We want to get things done. We want to be in the game. But if the stress is too much and too often, that's when mentor. So we just really are saying we want to embrace some stress. We just want to take a break from it. And in our world, that can be hard to do. So just thinking about things like that's where mindfulness has become mainstream medicine, taking a break, but also just getting a little bit of nature. There's these really interesting studies that if you're looking for something super simple, getting outside in some nature, a local park, a backyard, some flowers for 10 minutes, stress levels drop. So we want to have some stress. We just want to take a break from it. Even simpler, they did a study in Japan that if people just stared at a plant on their desk for 2 minutes, their stress levels came down. So gardening, nature, it's not the only answer. It's not the only solution, but we're always looking for little things that can have a big this idea of nature being nurturing, and any way that we can get a little bit of nature in our day can help bring stress levels down in a highly stressful environment.
I do this every day because I want to give you information that can help you live better lives and make better choices, and there's no hour that's better than this in terms of giving you information that can not just improve your life, but indeed save your life and boost your short and long-term brain health and significantly lower the risk of dementia and all the likes if you start taking these steps right now. As he said, little things that can have a huge impact. His name is Dr. Mark Milstein. His book is called The Age-Proof Brain, New Strategies to Improve Memory, Protect Immunity, and Fight Off Dementia. What a great conversation, Dr. Milstein. Thank you for your work, your research, and good to have you on this program.
Thank you. Great talking to you. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you for your time, sir. That is our program for today. Back here tomorrow morning to do it all over again, Lord willing, 9 a.m. to 12 noon Pacific time. Until then, thanks for tuning in. And as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Doug Davis, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network.